with me. But to start off where I want to come from, first of all, I'm a fourth generation coal miner. My great grandfather and his two sons, 14 and 16, were killed on the 23rd of December 1885. So that's two generations gone. The next generation, my father, was killed in Tower Colliery when I was 17. So there's no doubt who I am and where I come from. If a cow gives birth, you'll end up with a calf. There's no doubts about that. So I've got no doubt that my credentials, wherever they are, that's who I am. I was brought up with a widowed mother, understanding the price you pay in mining. That never ever changed my feelings belonging to the National Mine Workers. I went in at 15 years of age. My father was already working in Abraham Colliery. That's when I started my training. And from that moment till today, I'm still involved in mining. I haven't regretted one moment. Even though the tragedy of my father being killed, and me being out there college at the time, and them sending for me and saying, your dad has been killed. The first thing he told me was that he'd been injured. But as soon as the person arrived at the college to take me home, then they said, 45 years of age, and he was gone. Love of my life. I'm saying this because of all deaths, and all deaths are tragic, but when your partner was out in the morning and doesn't come home, as my mum often said to me, I never had a chance to say goodbye to her. I never had a chance to say I was sorry for things I'd done before. And that is the tragedy when you get killed in the job that you're doing. So I'm saying that just to get my credentials clear. Because of my father, he was a secretary of the union. Not because he was, as it happens. It wasn't the NUM. It was another union within British Coal. But he was the secretary of the branch, done his job, and probably started me on the road to where I was going to be. Up until I was 21, 22, that's all I wanted in life was sport. Played rugby, soccer, basketball. I loved sport. But then, I was in Abergorky, and when I was 18, I started to give an interest in the trade union movement. Even though I was playing sport, got on as a youth representative, then I was transferred to Tower. And from there on, things are different. I wasn't in Tower when my father was killed. I went to Tower later, 67. But I went to Tower, the very pit that my father got killed. So, that's my credentials. When you talk about the miners' strike, it's very important, as Mariam has already touched on, to understand the preceding years. Because up until the 60s, workers had no victories at all. None at all. No victories anywhere. We hadn't won anything. Even nationalisation of the mining industry wasn't for the workers. It never benefited the workers. So there were no victories for the working class. But incredibly, in 1969, we went out on strike in Tower Colliery. We went on strike to get shorter hours for surfacemen. Not for underground, for surfacemen. So here was the National Mine was out on strike for a section of the workforce. And that's important to remember that, because a larger body was willing to sacrifice for a smaller body. And that's the principle of the National Mine Workers, and always has been. So we won that strike. In South Wales, out of 37 pits, only 11 come out. I was actually picketed in pits in South Wales. Incredible, actually picketed in Penrith Colliery, a really left-wing radical pit. But they were unsure, so we picketed them. But we won. A limited strike, and we won. And all of a sudden, workers had a victory. That victory started to worry people. Also remember, in the 60s and the early 70s, we had this flush of new employment into Wales. Car factories, biscuit factories in Merthyr, Hoovers. All of a sudden, but the mining industry believed in skills. Lots of apprenticeships, lots of people trained in loads of skills. But what was happening now, that these people were leaving to go and work in Hoovers or anywhere else. Because the wages in the mine were going nowhere, and you could go outside and work in the factory, come to Bridgend, working in a car factory, and in a moment he was working on the ground. So in 72, we went out on strike to save jobs. We were out on strike to get some wages sorted. But we were working hard on the ground, and our wages had stopped building. So the 72 strike was on wages, and we won it. 11 weeks. People don't realise that. We were on strike for 11 weeks. That's how long that strike was. Remember the lights going out, the candles? Fantastic, wasn't it? Never had so much fun, right? But then, that victory gave us confidence. That didn't give us everything. Because yes, we'd rise the next 2 years. But then things stabilised again. And we still losing people in the 70s. So again, that did boost the wages. So we had the 1974 miners' strike. Now this is the one where Heath played his part. Because up until then, we had a fantastic agreement with Heath. Every time the cost of living went up by 3%, he'd give us 2% of our wages. We should never got rid of it. It was the best thing we ever had for Tory, right? But we needed our wages. We went up on strike. Now it's hard to think we were winning those ballots by something like 70%. And not no matter vote as well. Imagine that. And we still win the votes by 70%. So before I come to the 74 strike, let me explain another thing. In 1968, British Coal decided that instead of knocking on miners with these lovely flat areas, and Yorkshire miners, lovely flat areas, no mountains up there. Look at Wales, all mountains, well, undergrounds like that as well. So it was difficult. Although we had good quality coal, we couldn't mine it as fast as other places because there was difficult geology. So British Coal decided everyone who works in the mining should be paid the same. Not the same as London Waking, isn't it? Right? So over a period from 1968 to 71, wages were equalised throughout the mining industry. That's why we had the loyalty of Nottingham and Leicestershire. For no other reason. But they were now tied to us directly. 74 we had a ballot, overwhelmingly won the ballot. Out on strike 5 weeks. People forget that. Who else goes out on strike for 5 weeks in the last 35 years? Never mind with the miners' strike in a year. Who else has been out on strike for a week in the last 30 years? That's the worrying thing. Why have you gone backwards? That's the worrying thing. Ted Heath decided sympathy was on his side. Do you want the miners or do you want the Tories? Who runs the country? So he calls a general election. And he loses. Now technically that was great, wasn't it? The problem was that scared the life out of politicians. For the first time ever in the history of working people, all of a sudden working people had something that beat a government. Not just a company. Had actually taken on the government and beaten them. And that scared the life. Not only of the Thatchers of this world, it scared the life out of the Kinnocks of this world. Yeah. Right? That's the tragedy. They scared the life out of Labour as well. And I'm a Labour man. Before you tell me where I am, that should be done after. Right? But I've been Labour since I was 15. Right? And I got my reasons for that. I'll tell you, Prof. But, remember what I just said. It scared the life out of politicians. For the first time ever, we weren't scared of the government, and we weren't scared of the bloody Queen or the King. All of a sudden, workers were standing up for themselves. Crucial. Great victories. But not only that, that was a great time. 70s, 80s, 81, 82, 83, we were starting to change the world. Miners were having an influence. Young people today, you haven't had this opportunity I've had. I could go to a miners' conference, I would vote for 3% pay rise, and you know what? The following week, everyone in the country would have a pay rise. That's the power we had. We had the control of the wages being paid in Britain. And because we were international socialists, it affected the world. We were only ordinary people. But we were well organised and we were willing to share our beliefs. It wasn't accidental. From the moment I went into work at 15, you can understand